Welcome back to Sidelines TV. I'm here today in Wellington, Florida at Cloverleaf Farm with Stacia Madden. Stacia, how are you?
I'm good, thanks for asking. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Most of you will remember Stacia from the Horsepower Road to the Maclays TV show, but aside from being a TV star, she's the super top-level trainer, and we're lucky enough to catch up with her just to get some insights as to how maybe at home all of her vast knowledge might help at your barn or in your local show. I was wondering for myself, if you had to pick one horse, whether it's equitation, jumper, what would you as a trainer advise for people?
You know, that's such a good question because it's probably the very first question that a new customer will pose to me when we sit down and we have our initial consult. They'll say, well, you know, I can have one horse, you know, how do I do this and how do you advise me to go about it? And it's really a pretty standard answer because I believe so strongly in it that I always answer that if you can have one horse, it should be an equitation horse. And my reasons for saying that are not just because that's what I love and that's what I enjoy and it's a big part of my business, but I really feel that you can learn about the equitation part of the rules and the regulations by doing the medal and the Maclay, and then you can learn about the jumper rules by doing the USCT talent search class and the Washington jumper phase class. And then you get a really nice healthy introduction into the Washington hunter phase, learning the hunter rules and regulations. So I feel like I'm able to give kids a really broad discipline of all three disciplines. I'm able to teach them about some equitation, which I really just think means good riding in the end of the day, and teach them about the hunters and the rules that the hunters have, and then the jumpers, because they all have different set of rules.
They really do, and most people, it seems to me, start out in a niche and stay there and never really round themselves, where all of your riders are completely rounded.
Yeah, the next step usually ends up being if they can have a second horse or they can branch out a little bit. I usually introduce them to the jumpers because there's so many great levels. You can start off in the low children's if you're a children's rider, or low adult if you're an adult rider, and then you can just graduate up through regular children's and adult, and then the modifieds, and then the lows, and then the mediums, and then the highs, and then you basically made your step into some introductory Grand Prix maybe. So I think that when you start in the equitation, it really gives you a foundation on whether you seem to enjoy the jumpers, whether you have a knack for that, whether you seem to really enjoy the hunters and you have a knack for that. And I think the equitation is a platform for that decision.
I also wonder, do you ever encourage people to hold back until their equitation is really developed before they move on to jumping?
I think they go hand in hand. You know, I've got some children's riders down here this year that just started the 3/6 equitation, and I've got them mounted on some low children's jumpers just because I believe that saddle time is so important, and if I can get them in the ring twice a day when they're here on the weekend instead of once a day on a horse, I think it's just better. So I usually try to complement the equitation with a jumper of some sort.
Okay, and when people are in the hunter ring, is there any technique that you give your students to give judges like the full eye of them, or are there any little tricks you use?
I just always believe from judging classes myself and then sending riders in the ring that you really only have one chance to make a first impression. Mm-hmm. So I don't like the first jump being considered kind of a warm-up jump, which some trainers and riders will be okay with that. And I really encourage the riders when they go in the ring to just hit their pace, get in a nice forward seat, and try to make the first jump, catch the judge's eye, and make them want to keep watching the rest of the round.
I think that's really, really solid advice. You also this weekend just had the George Morris, and was that a big deal to prepare for all that?
It is a big deal because you spend all circuit kind of strategizing for week 11. First of all, you have to qualify, and when you've got a number of riders, you know, you're trying to figure out the best way to get them all qualified. Then after you get them qualified, then you've got to figure out how do I make it so that hopefully the horses and the riders will peak on the appropriate week, which would be week 11. So for me, it means taking week 9 off for the horses, getting them freshened up. Sometimes I even have the riders take week 9 off, and then If they need to have any vet work done of any sort, I'll do that on week 9. And then we get on week 10 and we really try to see where we are, and we show and we try to get a baseline. And then week 11 is really a real big focus, is getting the kids ready for the George Morris that are qualified for that. I spent 2 or 3 weeks before having the kids school themselves with their groom that was going to be with them. I spent a week or 2 before making them walk the courses themselves and watching what their plan would be and trying to give a little bit of information back to them of things that I might have changed. And a lot of flat lessons, weeks 10 and 11, working on the testing aspect so that when they get into that second round, they were prepared.
Mm-hmm. I've also noticed that you have a sort of hands-off approach once it comes to competition time. It must take a lot of nerve for you just to be so laid back.
You know what it is I really truly believe that the kids have to be confident in themselves, and that has to be developed. And I don't want them being dependent on me as an instructor, because so often the kids, when they're testing, they're in the rings by themselves these days, and it's actually one of my favorite tests. But I need to spend time with them early on in the year, getting to know how they think, so that when they're in that circumstance, when they're by themselves, they've been fed enough information during the year that they know how to handle that and they don't feel like they're on their own. So if I spend from the time I start training them until when they're in a championship moment like that, trying to work on their confidence and their independence, they feel way more at ease when they're called upon to do a test on their own. And you know, even my young riders who are doing 3-foot classes, you know, my assistants will do a lot of the groundwork, and then I'll show up to watch them, and they'll look at me and they'll want to go over their course one last time. And I'll just look at them and I say, do you already know your course? Do you have any questions? I'll let them ask me questions, but I don't want them to get in the habit of constantly rehearsing the course and having somebody to go over and over it with, because I think that ends up being a little bit of a fallback that they don't end up having when it really matters, and I don't want them to get used to it at an early stage.
Yeah, it builds confidence straight away. Great. Well, Stacia, I really appreciate you taking the time, and continued success with everything.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Great. Thank you. For Sidelines TV and Stacia Madden, I'm Rob Jordan.